Hey folks, today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called RPG Battles, the card game, and it's from designer David Eldred. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page to find out more information than I could possibly tell you here. To do that, all you gotta do is follow the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. Go there, find out more information, and hopefully consider backing the project. Now, RPG Battles is a competitive fantasy card game. You and the other players take control of adventurers who are wandering down into a dungeon filled with loot, but also filled with monsters and traps and all of those other fun or horrifying things that you're liable to find inside a dungeon. And what you need to do is just survive. You are trying to gather up whatever resources you need and use your special abilities, your unique special abilities, to the best of your ability in order to be the last adventurer left standing. And if you can do that, you win the game. If not, you lose. It's as simple as that, but of course it's not quite as simple as that. There are a few other details, and that's why we're going to take a look at a prototype copy of the game. So do bear in mind that what you see here may change in the final version, and after we take a look at that and sort of explain how the flow of the game works, then we're going to come back and discuss it further. RPG Battles is a competitive fantasy adventure card game for 2 to 6 players. Each player controls an adventurer from a fantasy world attempting to survive a deck of cards representing a monster and loot-filled dungeon. Using your own unique special abilities along with powerful gear and spells you'll find in the dungeon, you'll keep delving deeper and deeper until only one adventurer is left alive. If you are that adventurer, you win. Everyone else loses. Set up the game by first determining which character every player is getting. Every player will roll off with a d20, with the highest number getting to choose a character first until every character is chosen. The character card goes face up in front of the player along with 3 health tokens placed at the bottom of it. If you lose all 3 tokens, you are dead, unless you have a special Raise Dead card. Every character has a base armor rating and attack modifier, which we'll get back to later. Nearby will be your special ability card. Every adventurer has a unique ability that will either give them bonuses to attack or defense, more control over the cards in their hand, healing, or even the ability to steal from the other players. Some abilities are one-time use and must be flipped over to indicate this, while others are recurring. Next, every player gets a dagger card, which they put face up next to their character in the weapon slot. The teleport card is placed face down as the start of your character's hand of cards. A dagger confers no bonus in combat, but can be swapped with a better weapon card from your hand on a future turn, or discarded to make room for that better weapon. A teleport lets you escape from a monster at any time after it attacks you, and another player with the lowest d20 roll becomes the new target. But that player may also teleport, at which point another roll-off occurs and you may still be targeted again. Unused starting teleports, but not daggers, get shuffled back into the main deck. Speaking of that, the next step is to set up the main deck and players' starting hands. Take out all the monster, trap, teleport, and dagger cards, shuffle the rest, and then deal 4 cards out to each player face down. Together with their starting teleport card, each player now has a hand of 5 cards that they will keep hidden from the other players. Shuffle all of the remaining cards together with the monsters, traps, and remaining teleports, if any, but not any remaining daggers. Place the deck face down within reach of all players with space for a discard pile, alongside the d20s needed for initiative and combat and some general use tokens. Each player then rolls to determine who will go first, with turns going in clockwise order from there. The first thing you can do on your turn is play a card, if applicable. In your starting hand, or among the cards you may draw on your turns, there are several cards that can aid you. As mentioned before, powerful weapons can be equipped to your character in place of the starting dagger or any other weapon you no longer want, with the old weapon going back to the discard pile or your hand. Weapons can add their modifier to your base attack, and ranged weapons can be used to attack monsters first, regardless of initiative roll. Armor can also be found and equipped to your character, increasing your base armor rating. There are several other one-time use special cards in the deck with more dramatic effects, some of which can be played during this first phase, and some of which can be played at any time or during very specific instances. Cards like Haste and Time Stop, which can be used to avoid drawing on your turn, cards like Pickpocket and Alms, which can take cards from other players, Treasure and Healing Potion that can restore your health tokens, and the almighty Raise Dead card, which, as long as it's in your hand when you would otherwise die, will restore you to life with 1 health and no cards in hand. The second phase of a player's turn is drawing a card from the deck. This is mandatory unless you use a special card or ability to avoid it. If the card you draw is a gear or a special card, you add it to your hand and move on to the next phase. If it's a trap or a monster, you must stop, reveal it to everyone, and resolve it. If you go to draw a card for any reason and there are none remaining in the deck, immediately reshuffle the discard pile to make a new draw deck, and then draw what you were supposed to. Traps affect you and the other players to your immediate left and immediate right. All 3 players must roll a d20. On a 1 through 15, that player loses 1 health. Otherwise, they dodge the trap. It's entirely possible for a trap to kill every remaining player, in which case those players must roll off to see who wins. The trap is then discarded and play moves on to the next player in order, if any are remaining. A monster is left face up on the table and, one way or another, must be defeated before play can continue. Every monster has 2 health, their own armor and attack values, just like the players, and some of them have special abilities that must also be resolved if they're not killed fast enough. One other randomly chosen player will roll for the monster against the active player who drew the monster. Both the active player and the monster controller will roll d20s to see who attacks first. This is called initiative. But if the active player has a ranged weapon, they can get in the first attack regardless of this roll. To attack, simply roll a d20 and add your base attack on your cards. The players can add any modifier from weapons they may have or special abilities that they choose to use. If your modified roll meets or beats the defender's total armor rating, including any modifiers they may have, it's considered a hit and the defender loses 1 health. If the attacker's die roll was a 20 on the die, regardless of modifiers, it's considered a critical hit that automatically deals 2 health tokens of damage. If this is not enough to kill the defender becomes the attacker and rolls their attack. This continues until either the monster is dead and discarded or a player character dies, which may not be the original active player if a teleport was played. The monster then is discarded, wanders away, and if there's more than 1 player remaining, the game continues with the next player in order. The final phase of any player's turn is discarding. If you have more than 5 cards in hand, you must discard down to 5. Then, play proceeds to the next player in order. The game will continue like this until all but 1 player is dead. That remaining player is the winner of the game. And that is RPG Battles. Well, in case you didn't notice, not just from the overview that I gave of the game, but also from the name of the game, what RPG Battles does is condense the tabletop role-playing game experience, fantasy role-playing game experience, down into its most focused constituent parts. You and adventurers go into a dungeon, fight monsters, avoid or take the brunt of traps, find loot, and basically try to get stronger and survive. But of course, this is a competitive card game, so the wrinkle that it throws in is that you have to survive. There's only going to be 1 winner, and you're hoping that it's you. So that's what you're, working in service of. It avoids making it too confrontational. Obviously, there is confrontation because you're trying to avoid monsters, which by default means you're, with the teleport card at least, foisting them onto the other players. Or you're doing things like stealing cards from them or forcing them to give you a card with the alms card, for instance, that kind of stuff. And also some other, skullduggery involved, like using the using the haste card in a certain way actually forces the other player to draw a card more rapidly, things like that. But none of this feels like, oh, I'm attacking you directly. It just feels like you're all rushing towards the same goal and sometimes throwing up roadblocks in front of each other, so to speak. Sometimes in the form of giant monsters that are trying to kill you. Those kind of roadblocks. So it still feels like you're adventuring together, but also feels like very much like you are focusing on what you need to do just to survive because you are. One of the things that also gets that RPG theme through is the fact that each of you has your own unique special abilities and modifiers to really make it feel like every time that you play, potentially you are doing something different, you're having a different focus, and really deciding, letting that govern how you play. Like, you're still at the mercy of the cards that come out of the deck, but having those special abilities, and then also as you progress through the game, having your own hand of cards that you can use at any time, potentially, but also the equipment, the armor and the weapon that you have, that will all sort of guide you through what your play style is going to be, so you can feel like you're doing something different each time that you play the game. And the game, while it seems like there's a lot of moving parts at first, like, oh, I've got to worry about equipment and modifiers, and there's monsters and traps and all these other different cards that all do different things, and special abilities. It feels kind of overwhelming at first, but the reality is it's very simple to teach, fast to teach, and it's also fast to play as well. This is the kind of game, and it might have been the intent as well, it's the kind of game that you would bust out either between board games that you're playing, or at the start of the night, or if you're doing a tabletop RPG night and you're like, okay, I want to get people in the mood for fighting monsters and potentially, backstabbing each other a little bit if you run that kind of role-playing game. And this is the kind of game you would play to set that mood, or just to keep people in the fantasy monster frame of mind while maybe the DM is setting something up that's taking a long time, setting up the map and so on and so forth, because it can be played and taught in that brief amount of time. So even if you have new players coming into your tabletop RPG club or board gaming club, and you just need something like, hey, this is not just Love Letter again, or any of the other simple card games that people just bust out without even thinking about it. This is something that has a little more meat to it, but still not so complicated that you can't teach new people or teach people quickly. And so it kind of fits into that niche. And there's also like tons of room for it to expand, adding new monsters, adding new gear, new player characters. Just like with a tabletop role-playing game, the sky's the limit. There's so many different things that could potentially be added, but of course that's up to you and the other backers of the Kickstarter project, potentially. So if any of that sounds like it appeals to you, if you want a fast, sort of cutthroat card game, but still makes it feel like you're kind of doing your own role-playing game type thing of going down through the dungeon, sort of the Diablo loot and slash type thing. If you like the artwork, if you like the fact that it has that quick card game feel, but with more meat on the bones, so to speak, or if you know someone who likes any of these things, then hey, you don't need to take my word for it. You can go to the official Kickstarter project page and find out more information than I could have possibly told you here, and see what the future of the project is. To do that, all you gotta do is follow the link in the top corner of your screen, as well as down in the description section underneath this video. That is RPG Battles, the card game from designer David Eldred. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, for supporting our sponsors.